Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to Jolie's, where you can get spicy sausage, roasted nuts, and the freshest React content on the internet. Today, we're going to be watching the latest video from Asmondgold that's titled Ugly Females in Video Games. I'm really excited to see what he has to say about this topic because I do believe he has a much more nuanced take than a lot of people, and I'm really looking forward to contrasting it with my own take, but, giving him the benefit of the doubt. So why don't you go ahead and grab a snack, grab a drink, and hell, hit that like and subscribe button while you're doing it. And we're going to get into this in 3, 2, 1.
Hi guys, it's me again.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about some drama. We're going to be discussing the new games that got announced at the Game Awards, and I watched the show. I thought it was great. I had a good time, but a lot of people didn't.
And this is already where I feel like Asmund's audience is, in the people that talk to him are really dictating his view on the conversation. I watched his reaction to the Video Game Awards just a few days ago, and to me it seemed like he had a pretty he didn't call out any of the female characters in the moment, and he only has, I think, negative, like kind of a negative disposition towards one of them, but we'll see what he gets into. But I think for for the record, I want to say that I think Siri looks great personally, and I'm sure she'll just look better by the time that game's done. And she looks appropriate. She's supposed to be in her 30s or something at this point. She's like in her young 30s and in a weathered life. She looks like a woman would, and she doesn't. I mean, she looks pretty attractive to me, in an appropriate way. So let's see what he has to say about that.
And guess what? It's for the two main games that got announced there. The Witcher 4 and also Intergalactic.
Yeah, that's the other one. Now that one had, the actress or the character reminded me of an actress from Aliens, Romulus, but she has the bald head, and she definitely looks like, I guess, I don't want to say gender neutral, but definitely kind of like non-binary, I guess, very masculine, feminine crossover.
Now, both of these games, I think, had a lot of discourse surrounding them, and we're going to talk about that discourse. And we're also going to talk about what that discourse implies with people that have become increasingly against and at war with reality. And this, every single time that reality hits them in the face, there are a lot of Twitter threads about it because people are not happy.
Yeah, so I think that for the most part, like this kind of conversation, I'm nervous to wade into these waters, but I feel like the two extremes, this is like one of those times I think I'll often say that while I'm not trying to be some sort of enlightened centrist or anything like that, this is definitely one of those places where the answer for me lies somewhere in the middle. And I think that the two extreme voices are, that are dictating the conversation are saying a lot of stuff that I would disagree with. And I think both would probably be ultimately upset with my final verdict, but let's go on and see what he's seeing, because he is in it every day in the pressure cooker.
And guess what? If you spend all day on the internet, you usually have a distorted view of what the world looks like. And even to a certain
100%.
extent, I'm sure so
brother.
do I, but it seems like these people are even worse than I am.
And at least he's aware of it. He knows that he's like essentially like the king internet troll, or he's like the king of online, like overly online dude. I mean, I have a video idea in the future, and I'll give you a little preview of it. But I really feel like Asmongold is a Nick Mullen type. He is the current reigning champion of overly online person. There was a term that my friends often used back in the pre-COVID era, chronically online, something like that. I'll probably remember it during this video, but I feel like Asmongold kind of represents that. Today he's almost like taken, like the Highlander or something like that, or he's taken the mantle from Nick Mullen, who I think has diversified his life and is living a much more, a wider life than he used to. And now Asmongold is now the new chronically online guy.
So anyway, let's go ahead and at the beginning, I want to talk about one thing before we get into either of the games, actually. Let's talk about subjective opinions. So anybody cannot like or like a video game for whatever reason that they want. They don't have to justify this. They don't have to explain it. They don't have to debate it or argue it with anybody else. So if you do or you don't like any video game, you should never feel like you're obligated to defend that opinion or not, because it is your own subjective opinion and you have every right to it and nobody can take that away from you.
But we know this already. The people will argue these subjective opinions until the cow comes home, and they will stay online and not only argue their opinions but dig deeper and attack people who disagree with them on their opinions. I don't want to. The word both sides is probably going to come out of my mouth often, but I'm pretty sure we're going to find examples from both sides of this topic on this. It's like, yes, you can have a subjective opinion, but and you're entitled to it. But once you voice it, people will, weigh in. Like, if your subjective opinion is that Mario 64 is the worst Mario game in the world, I'm going to weigh in and be like, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? Are you the Mario game that revolutionized Mario games that they couldn't even top until just this past few years with Mario Odyssey? It took them so long to ever even attempt to make another Mario 64 and do it right. So, sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent about Mario 64. Let's get on a tangent about ugly female leads. Oh, why would you put ugly girls in games? All I want is pretty girls and no guys. I want my gacha games with no guys and 120 waifus for me. So screw 120 stars for Mario. I want 120 waifus for me.
So I just want to make that very clear, because there have been so many people talking about how, oh, well, this person shouldn't be having this opinion. You shouldn't be saying this. You shouldn't care about this. Well, guess what? Some people do. Too fucking bad. Anyway, let's talk about The Witcher 4.
Yeah.
Now, The Witcher 4, The Witcher 3, one of the best-selling games in the last 10 years, had a male protagonist.
Really?
The new game has a female protagonist. If you understand the story, which at least I kind of do,
bad.
I understand at least enough of it to see why the new female protagonist is the one carrying on the story.
Yeah, I mean, like, yet again, I haven't played The Witcher 3. I know a lot about it. I'm probably like a lot of people in this day and age where I know a lot about games that are very popular, even if I don't play them. And if you were to ask me, like, who do you think The Witcher 4 is going to focus in on, there's a good chance I would have said Ciri, because the game is basically building her up the entire time, if I understand correctly. And it ultimately turns out to be her story that, that is the game where Geralt passes on the torch. So I don't feel like this should have been a surprise. And also, I think it's earned. It's not just like force in your face DEI or whatever term you want to use. This is like, we've been setting this up for a long time. This mantle was going to be passed on. We have established this character through multiple or through an entire series of games. What more can you want? This has to be like to bring up like, DEI or some consulting company came in and made us do it. I think CD Projekt Red had this probably planned. They were probably talking about this as like where Witcher 4 would go when they were making Witcher 3.
Now, this, however, has caught a lot of people off guard, and it's frustrated a lot of people, because I think that there has been a growing trend that people are observing of genres and different IPs that have had a male lead that's being replaced by a female lead. And I think also, this is, again, it goes into my first point about people being at war with reality, because I've got to tell you guys, gender is a massive barrier with relatability. It just is. And that doesn't mean that that's the case with everybody. I'm sure there's going to be people that, can't understand abstract ideas, so they have to comment and say, that's not what I think. Well, that's nice. But I think that in a general sense it is. I think gender is a massive barrier to relatability. So if you...
That's very interesting, and I should maybe confess my own perspective here, because when I play video games that I get to choose my gender, most of the time I play as a girl. I make a pretty woman and play as that. My Darth Revan was a woman the first time I played Knights of the Old Republic. And if I'm not doing that, it's because I want to see if I can create myself in the character creator. Now, my brother's far more creative than me and far less horny, and he creates wild looking dudes. So he like basically tries to create a Joker baby almost every single time he plays a game. So just saying that my perspective on this is gender has never really been a barrier. I play games with women, I choose to play games with women. I think that it's just a good way. It's like a good way of creating that detachment. It's like, this character isn't me. I'm playing somebody with a story. I'm playing with somebody with a history. And the best way for me to do that is to make them not me. And the quickest way to make them not me is to make them a woman. As a cis man, that's just going to be the first thing that I would think. It's like, your creative impulse. Like, what's the opposite of a cis man? It's a woman, a cis woman. So, but I do plan on playing some games on stream, and I think for the purpose of those games, though, I will probably end up playing male protagonists for at least for the classic games, because I do want to play those as though I'm the default character. But I'll tell you more about those, or you'll see those on my other channel, Jolie Gaming, here in a bit. So let's get back into Asmond. But just so you know, I play women characters. I love women. I play women characters, but I will say I do make them attractive. I don't play uggos.
You take a character that people relate to and they can see themselves in, and you change its gender, you do fuck with a lot of people's vision of the game and of the story. I think that's just how it is. And you can disagree with that, but that doesn't mean that it's going to go away. I think it is very, very, very much the truth. And so a lot of people are unhappy about this. And they also thought that Ciri is uglier, because if you compare her model in game for The Witcher 4, for The Witcher 3, and then you look at The Witcher 4, she does.
Hey, people saying that she's uglier. How old was Ciri in The Witcher 3? Bookham. Wait, was it Bookham Stew? Bookham Lou. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say not the argument to be making. I don't know exactly how old Ciri is, but I'm pretty sure she's being depicted as like a late teenager. So tread lightly, internet folk, with complaining that Ciri is less hot now. And also people's like the gulf between a late teenager and a 30-something with that kind of lifestyle, you're going to get weathered. And so it is realistic. I think, I'll say this. I think that there's a huge difference there's hot and there's attractive. And I think, or handsome maybe is also another word for it. And maybe Ciri isn't hot, but I don't think that her kind of character should be hot. But she can be attractive, and I think she is attractive. She's not unpleasant to look at least from the trailer I saw, which I've only watched on my phone so far, so I might need to go back and watch it big.
Look a bit older, and it's a CGI trailer, so there's a lot more detail put into it. It looks more realistic. Now, my personal opinion, I have actually personally dated a Polish girl with a big nose. So I think that she's fine. But
hell yeah, brother. Based. Yeah, I mean, that's huge, though. Like, I've played a few games with people who looked like former lovers, and it definitely had a warping effect psychologically.
That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody else does. If you think she's ugly, you don't want to play the game because of that, that's fine. Mm-hmm. That's whatever. I personally don't think so, and I think that CD Projekt Red has earned a degree of my trust with how well they've handled Cyberpunk and also The Witcher 3, that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to really, really hope that the game is in fact actually good. So we'll have to wait until we see her in-game model and we see a little bit more of the story before I go ahead and start complaining and crying about this all too much. So
that's actually a really good perspective in general. CD Projekt Red is to be trusted for the most part. I mean, Cyberpunk came out. It was a little bit of fiasco, but they followed through and delivered on their product with the patches. Witcher 3 is still a beloved classic, and yeah, this is a long-going narrative franchise, and also it's an early CGI trailer. I mean, they could even listen to the feedback and kind of shape up the model a little bit if they also agree that maybe we had to rush this to get this trailer out, so we didn't fine-tooth comb. We're looking at it with new eyes now that we're on the other side of it, because let's face it, this was definitely a project that they've been have the horse blinders on and just trying to get it done. I know how these things go from my own, just making a card game. You just get into these modes where we just have to get out what we can.
There's that. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the growing issue with a lot of games that are adding characters that are unattractive, unappealing, and unlikable. And oftentimes it's all three.
I will say the most important one in that, I mean, unattractive you can get away with, unappealing, that's a hard hill to die on, but unlikable is a tightrope that you have to walk very carefully, and you have to be very mindful of the characters that you're making unlikable. There are so many TV shows, so many books, so many games that a character was unlikable enough for me just to walk away from. You want to spend time with these people. If you're going to choose to spend time doing something, you want to enjoy what you're spending time with. And if somebody, like in real life, if you had an unlikable coworker and they were trying to hang out with you and you didn't like them, you would probably not reciprocate. You would probably try to get them not to hang out with you. So just keep that in mind.
Fortunately, but many times it's in fact just one. And so what's happened is that I think that a lot of studios have fallen prey to this idea that players and people want to have realistic characters. I don't actually think that this is true. I think that this is a media narrative that's created by journalists, and it's created by people that write about video games, talk about them. But the truth is that I think most people, they actually do care about what a character looks like to an extent, and the people that don't care are irrelevant anyway, because let's go ahead and use a little bit of logic. So why would you ever put a ugly character in a video game? Well, I think that this serves no one. I don't think it serves anybody, because for all the people that don't care whether the character looks good or not, well, then those people are going to play or not play the game anyway, and the reasoning for that is going to be completely independent of the character's appearance. And for the people that are going to play a game or do care about a character's appearance, and they use that as a criteria of whether they like the character or not, and by the way, a lot of people say that people don't do this. If people didn't do this, microtransaction cosmetics would not be making billions of dollars, okay?
Yeah, there's often this, I mean, what I'm learning as I get older and learn that there is nothing but capitalism is the money speaks. Money speaks loudly. And if people are spending money on cosmetic things, and like you said, microtransactions, that's the truth. That's the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Like, this is just such a completely stupid, delusional thing to say. They would not be able to sell all these cosmetics if people did not care about how they looked in video games. So, that being said, and there's a million other examples I can use, like gacha games, etc. But I think that let's just look at cosmetics as a meta thing, and then that immediately proves that people do care. Maybe you don't, but again, abstract sample, there are many people who do. And for the people who do care, I do think that having a character that is unappealing, unlikable, or just in general not something that people want to see, that's just unrelatable. I think that's another really component. Not necessarily what people don't want to see, but just in one way or another unrelatable. I think this serves literally zero purpose. And in fact, all it does is it serves to hurt the game. So let me explain why. Again, so you have all the people who are, they don't care about the way the character looks. They don't give a shit about it. They're going to play the game based off of the gameplay. Well, they've already made their decision, and the way the character looks, stated by them, is that they don't care. So then you only have the remaining people who do care about how a character looks. Now, do you think that more people care if a character is attractive or unattractive? Do you think that more people want a character inside of the group of people who care about the way a character looks? Are there more people inside of that group that want the character to be attractive or unattractive?
Attractive! I mean, this goes back to, Hollywood films. I mean, it is, like, let's talk about Man Bites Dog. It is a headline when a character, somebody is cast who is unappealing or unattractive, and it's usually done for very specific reasons in story. And the default actor or actress is going to be a very attractive person. Men get away with not being conventionally attractive, but that's because women are kind of, they are wide in what they find appealing. I mean, geez, like I've heard people want to get, people want Shrek to be their daddy. Some women are like that. Guys are a little more narrow focused and, readable. We tend to like the same things as other guys. But yeah, it's like if you were making if they were casting a Hollywood movie and they cast an ugly person to play the new Iron Man, I think you would see a similar kind of uproar and possibly a little bit more widespread, or like it being a little more just, what's the word I'm looking for, acceptable in popular conversation. And these are people that you get to build from the ground up. So to end up with something that isn't attractive, it's like it's seen as a mistake, I think, or like somebody, whoever, like somebody was like face blind in making the character.
Well, I'm just going to take the wild guess and think that they probably should think that the character should be hot. That's it. And this is also true for guys.
Oh, he used a term there interchangeably that I do want to get into, because I think there's a difference. I think hot and attractive are slightly different things. It's like attractive is a wider net and hot is more specific. And I don't think every character should be hot, because it's almost, it's a, you know it when you see it. If I was doing editing on this video, if this was like a deeper dive, I might like throw up examples of what I think classifies as hot and attractive. But I think attractive is just like, you know, the textbook example would be like, you know, pleasant to look at, probably softer around the edges, and very symmetrical, no blemishes, no freckles. Well, I shouldn't say no freckles, but no blemishes. Versus hot is a subsection of, like, hot and cute are two different things, you know. Hot and sexy and cute are three different things. And this applies to both genders. I think that, you know, it's like you could have a boyishly good looking guy, or a rugged good looking guy, or a, you know, like a incubus good looking guy, you know, devilishly good looking, and all three of those are attractive, but they are different kinds of attractive that you would use different terms for.
As well. I don't really think that anybody wants to play, well, maybe some people do. Many people probably don't want to play a version of a, you know, a fat neckbeard brony wearing a fedora with a My Little Pony t-shirt with cargo pants and socks and sandals on, and this guy is going to be the one who saves the world from God, right? He's going to have to destroy God. Many people probably would not really relate with that character, and they'd rather have somebody like Clive from Final Fantasy 16. And so this is true cross-gender, but it's also another big issue, what I was saying before, about people that are living in opposition to reality. A lot of people are in the mindset that these things are not relevant. These things do not matter. And again, they don't matter to a lot of people, but they matter to enough people for this to make a difference. And
I do want to say that well, I got to get used to, if I pause the button, I actually have to say something of interest. Oh no, I put myself in quite a pit. I don't even quite recall what he was saying. But no, I think that's true. Like if you're if you're maximizing for profit, you know, I think he lays out the logic pretty well that you're going to want to have an attractive character, because, you know, it's having an unattractive character is only a hindrance. And like I said, I think attraction that's a little subjective, but I think we all know what somebody who's pleasant to look at is, and somebody who you want to look at. It should be somebody like I have this whole theory about like why cinema became the biggest art form when the projector and the camera happened, and they started going out of their way to find the most beautiful, interesting, gorgeous looking people and putting them on the big screen. And this, you know, like I said, the theory is such a strong word here, so I'm a little hesitant just to be like, you know, there's my theory. But it's like, before that, it's rude to stop and stare at people, right? We can all agree that it's rude to be like, you know, just gaw faced at tongue out. Even worse if you're a wolf who you know, lets his tongue roll out upon a table and then bangs it, and literally a wolf howls at a hot woman walking by. And ladies, you could probably do it too. You know, if you were just to stop and stare at a guy, it might be considered a little more quirky. You might be able to get away with it depending on how attractive you are as well. But you can't. But what movies did was it allowed us to look at attractive people, and, you know, storytelling was more of almost like my hot take here. Got it. My hot take here is that the story was almost more just like or the idea of storytelling and narrative just became the glue to hold everything together. But there's a reason movie stars were so popular, and the reason we're seeing a decline in theater and people going to the theaters and seeing these cinematic story is because that like the base thing that a lot of people went for, your general audience, was to go and see attractive people and be able to stare at them. And guess what we can do? We can pick up our phone and Google Scarlett Johansson and just look at her all day long like we're some monkey brained people. So there's a reason why the coming of the internet, and there's a reason why Instagram women who are attractive tend to have very large followings on Instagrams and other platforms where they might link you to from their Instagram, to show whole.
Also hear the narrative that these are things that are only held by a small minority of people. Only a small minority of people actually think this. And I have a challenge to everybody who thinks that. If you think that all of the people that dislike whatever game it is, whether I think the Intergalactic game is probably the one that's most worst received, I want you to find me a reveal trailer of a video game that has a less than 50% like ratio that turned out to be a success for a studio. Go ahead. Go ahead. Let's find out. And you know what? I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of them. I've looked for them. I've tried to find them, and I didn't see a single one. And so what I think is happening is that you have people that want to believe something so bad that it's caused them to distort reality into imagining that it's actually real. And
I'm just going to say the 2024 presidential election, as a Democrat, I felt like after the votes came in, I felt like I stepped out of a reality distortion field and was slapped in the face as to the reality of what people are actually thinking and feeling in this country. And if it can happen for the most important political events, like we only get like 2 a decade essentially. Can you get 3 presidential elections in a single decade? No. So yeah, that's it happens. And if it can happen at the presidential level, I'm sure it's happening in game studios as well. Now, what is it that they believe that people want to not be playing as hot characters? I would love to see some science on that, or some opinion pieces. But I think that might be the difference between working on a game for 3-4 years. Maybe you are like you're trying to be too clever, reinvent things, shake things up, and make a character who's not conventionally attractive. It seems like, oh, that's the next thing to subvert. I don't know, but I'm going to say there's a big difference between working, the thoughts that you have working on a game for 4 fucking years versus the thoughts that you have playing a game for 40 hours.
So what's happened is that a lot of these people are so fixated around making sure that the game reinforces some worldview that they have that they are unwilling to look at the rational implications of what is actually something that players want to see. And this goes into the idea of genres. Now, I'm sorry, guys, but I guess I have to be the bearer of bad news. But if you're making a video game and it's set in space, you're a bounty hunter, you've got guns, and you fight things with laser swords, the majority audience of that game is going to be a bunch of fucking guys. And that's it. So if you make a game like that and you don't appeal to that target audience, you are going to have a very hard time selling that game. And it doesn't matter whether you think this should be true or not, or whether you know somebody who isn't part of that group, who is a girl or whatever, who likes these games, or a guy who doesn't like them. That's totally fine, but I think that the averages speak for themselves. You can look at games like Concord, Dragon Age Veilguard, or any of the other games that have come out recently that have tried to take a non-traditional approach in telling a story that is meant for a majority male audience. And I think that guess what happens? When that happens, well, a lot of people get frustrated, disappointed, and they think to themselves, you know what? I don't think this game's meant for me. I'm not going to play it. And that's what happens. And so I feel like how many points on a graph do you need to be able to draw a line? I think that it's very obvious that these things clearly do matter a lot to players, and this is... not not enough of a small minority for it not to be taken seriously. And also, I think that the implication is that a minority of people actually care about these things, whereas I think the actual reality is that a majority of people do. It's just that the amount of people that dislike it on social media might be a little bit higher, but it is more or less a respective sample size.
Okay, yeah, this is something that we sort of I don't know. I became aware of as a cultural thing on Twitter before COVID. So I would say like maybe 2017, 2018. But the idea that there's like a small group of people who band together to push a narrative. And the thing is like, bring a small group of people together and on the same topic and who are trying to go for the same goal, and they're very powerful, and it could seem like their voice is the majority voice, and you have to be very mindful that they are out there hammering a drum that might be what is it called, the vocal minority. I think my dad would prefer to like, I guess, anything he disagreed with, he would just be like, well, that's a vocal minority who's overstating it. But now that I've seen it happen in IRL with our, not IRL, but in cyberspace with like, people getting together on Twitter and making a news story out of, whatever they decide is the topic of the day, and turning a villain of the day, which was like a thing on Twitter for quite a few years. Just like, every so many weeks or so many days, there would be a new main character who is all of a sudden vilified, and heaven forbid you fall into the spotlight, and every single tweet that you tweeted was examined and questioned. So, especially if you're somebody with a sense of humor. Jeez, oof, man, nothing worse to have than a sense of humor once the pitchforks come out.
Because I've never really seen a case, as I said before, where a game was massively hated on, like the reveal trailer, and then it turned out to be a massive success. I just don't really think this happens. First impressions are really important, and it matters a lot if you make them or not. And so a lot of developers are trying to design games and make games for everybody. They're trying to make the game for the target audience of anybody can play this game. It's going to appeal to everyone. Well, unless you're playing Tetris or you're playing some other sort of abstract game like that, this is just simply not the case. There are going to be games that are more appealing to men versus games that are more appealing to women. The same as there's music that way, the same as there's, movies that way, manga that way. I mean, manga, they do it right. They literally have names for it. Shonen is literally made for young guys. So that's basically the way that they handle it, and I think that they're doing a lot better than comic books now, last time I checked.
That's an interesting point to make, is like, not every piece of media is made for everybody, but everybody should have a little piece of media that they can call their own, and maybe it is more accurate or more like, I don't want to just sit back and say superheroes are for boys and Barbies are for girls and Archie is a girl's comic, but boys could secretly like it, and superheroes sometimes have a girl character that the girls really like. I don't want it to reduce it that much, but it is like being so targeted, because there's a message. I personally think that there's a message that little boys want and need to hear, and there's a message that little girls want and need to hear, and some life lessons that each gender probably needs to have targeted towards them. So the idea of like having those fictions, I don't know, assigned to them, is that an appropriate thing to say? I don't know. I think that it sets expectations for sure. This is definitely something to do further research into. I think I like with these videos that Asmond makes, he makes a lot of good points, but I would love to see him do not just React content and not just these hot takes, but actually do like a deep dive and, or correlate his research and write an essay. It'd be interesting to see an Asmondgold video essay, but knowing that, he himself admits that he's a lazy man, and as a fellow lazy man, I understand, like, that's why I'm starting with React content first and foremost, build my way up to the video essay. I think like, I think his intuition is mostly correct, but it would be interesting to do things like compare and contrast, like media literacy or media was it a consumption in Japan manga versus media consumption with American like comic books or our other medias. I don't know. There's something there. He's hitting on something that I wish would go on for another like 2 hours.
So the big issue is that people are trying to design and create a narrative that is based off of a worldview that doesn't actually exist. And what's happening is that you see games like Intergalactic and you see games like Concord or Dragon Age or whatever, where they are designed with this perspective that, well, anybody can relate to anybody. And of course, this can be true to an extent, but it's not true on a law of averages.
It's not, unfortunately, it's not true based on intelligence. I believe that your ability to relate to other people has correlated to what intelligence level you are, what kind of intelligence you have too, because I do think that there's different kinds of intelligence. Yet again, not an expert. Don't, I would love to hear more about that in the comments if you know anything about it. But, you definitely know somebody who's way socially smarter than somebody else who is way more like math and engineering smart, and somebody else who's like an aesthetic genius. And those people need to come together, and like when they work together, great things happen. But when you don't have a genius or a talent for anything, and you're not the smartest tool in the shed, you tend to rotate and view your world around your perspective. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who are like that, and they make up a lot of people who probably play video games. So I'm thinking that I'm going a long way to say that, if you're kind of a dum-dum, then you probably can't actually relate to other people, and thus you're not going to want to walk in their shoe. I imagine, I don't want to burn anybody or do any stray shots at anybody, but I'm sure if you walk into the game, your first instinct is to create yourself. I would put that as a point on the as you said, a point on the statistical graph to suggest that maybe you might lean less wide perspective, less broadly minded. Let's just say that.
And I think that that's what's really happened, is that you have people that have convinced themselves and gaslighted themselves into thinking that the only way that you can make this game and make it successful is if you make it appeal to everybody, but in the case of appealing to everyone, you actually, in fact, appeal to no one at all.
That's like marketing 101. It's like, that's, in fact, that could be the fall of the Democratic Party right there. I don't want to get too into politics, but I'm going to. I haven't even had a few rounds, but I feel like one of the big failures there was you think that you have your base shorn up so tightly that you can start appealing to other audiences and messaging to other audiences who you don't have yet. And while you're going out there and sending out a message for audiences that you don't even have shorn up yet, the base that's hearing that message that you're sending to the people who aren't going to be your customer or your voter are hearing a message that doesn't appeal to them. And all of a sudden, now you're not only possibly not gaining new voters or consumers, you're losing the ones that you already had. So it's tight, and it's a hard thing to do, especially when your company requires infinite growth all the time, growth year over year. You're going to have to find new customers. And if you can't find new customers, I guess, I don't want to be too dramatic, but you think you're going to die. And I honestly think no, you just keep your customers and keep them happy and keep offering them something new, and you're going to have hit after hit, or at the very least, you're going to have solid performer after solid performer. And this is something, I have to worry about with my own game, X Seekers of Fortune. We're always talking about who is our target audience. In fact, maybe one of the faults that we could have potentially had is not totally identifying our target audience, what they call the super fan of our game before we went to Kickstarter, and thus we didn't quite hit the number, the traction we were looking for. And it's something you have to think about all the time. You have to think who is going to be the super fan of your game. And I'll say this right now, you might not want to be trying to target a super fan who doesn't play games, period. It's, selling them a game, selling them your game might not happen.
Just like Concord did. Just a second, take a drink.
Okay, I should have paused at a great time, didn't I, guys?
So, what I think is going to happen is that these games are going to come out, the reception around them is going to become more negative, and the games will not
Okay.
sell well. And I think this has been
All
proven
right.
time and time again. And ultimately, for all the people that like good gameplay, they're not going to care about this. That's totally fine. But I think that there are enough people out there that also, there's another component to this as well, is that when people view or they perceive some degree of like messaging, or they perceive some degree of like social politics in a video game, it immediately takes them out of the immersive experience the game is trying to create, and it makes them think about the game in the context of real life contemporary social politics.
Okay, so yeah, this is getting to, like, probably the core point that's going to be like the most fire, having the most firebrands on both sides, and the one that while I'm comfortable talking about, I do feel like my answer will, satisfy nobody. But I think this, if there's any reason that Dragon Age failed, Veilguard failed, and I guess there's an argument that maybe it didn't fail. Who knows? Like, not an expert, but the game seemed like the game became a political message, a political statement above everything else, and I think that was to the game's detriment. So yeah, I think that there was a lot of people out there who just don't want, well, especially in a fantasy game. See, I had the opinion that I don't think non-binary is a fantasy word, and that you already have like examples in real life, like twin spirits or two spirits and things and other terms that were used before the modern era. Like, non-binary is definitely a word that has been typed on an iPhone more than it's been handwritten. And when it comes to a very much like, you have that test for actors. It's like, does this actor look like they are from the past? Do they look like they've seen an iPhone? Like, if you put them in historical dress, do they look too modern? And I think the term non-binary is a too modern of a term. You can sell the same concept, but you have to jazz it up. I mean, that's what they often did that in like, they make up new words for almost everything in fantasy. Like, that's almost like the trope of the fantasy genre is, oh, what are going to be the words? Like, are you going to have a different word for magic? And is bricklayer going to have its own term? And what are you going to call this and that? And your martial arts, is it going to have its own term? So it's like, it's almost like expected. And then to have a game set in a fantasy-esque world where they're just throwing around these modern ass terms, I think turned a lot of people off. And I bet a lot of them wouldn't have minded if there was a fantasized, a glossary made up for it. They would have actually probably doubled down on the concept if it had taken that approach. I think when you bring in real world terminology into a place where it doesn't work, like, I think a lot of people would have been upset if they started throwing around, if there was like some wizard building some sort of super massive magical contraption that was designed to create an artificial intelligence. I think that would have also upset people. It's like, well, why would you call it artificial intelligence? That's a modern post World War II conception of it. You would call it like some automaton or a mechanical brain or something like that. They would have like some older, like pre-industrial or like right on the cusp of industrial era way of talking about it. And that would be the fun part. You're kind of you're taking away the juice of fantasy when you take away that aspect of it. That's like one of the fun things about fantasy.
And I think this destroys the escapism, and it makes people more skeptical and less, positive about these video games in a general way. And I think also this happens with movies and TV shows as well, but in a lot of cases it just happens with video games the most because that's what I talk about the most. But anyway, with a lot of these characters, anytime that I see a character that's added into a video game and the character is not attractive or the character is meant to be unappealing to a majority of people, or it's not, it's like doing one of those things where it's like, oh, well, all the people that don't like this are bigots or racists or something like that. You can call people that all you want, but that's never going to convince them to buy your game. And I think that the people that do that Anytime I see that in a trailer, I automatically assume the game is going to be complete trash. And you think to yourself, what do you mean? Like, that just means the character's ugly. Like, who cares? It's what about the gameplay?
See, I kind of know where he's going with this because I've watched enough Asmongold to know like his main talking points on this subject. So he, I think what I want to say almost in preparation for this is something I noticed in movies, and I think even ones that didn't have this sort of politics. There's like, I think that there's a lot of, okay, I'll say this. There's a lot of movies coming out for Netflix that I don't watch. I don't subscribe to Netflix. My only subscription is YouTube Premium because I think YouTube is honestly the future. We're already living in the future and it's YouTube. It is amazing. And everything being produced, or most of the things being produced for Netflix at this point and all the other streaming apps, are either overly prestige or they're slop. And there's almost like no in between. You're either like trying too hard to be prestigious, or you're just throwing junk together and calling it and saying it's done. And I think a lot of the people who well, yet again, could use could use more research, but I do think that there might be a chance that a lot of the people who are tasked with making the slop try to find some way of elevating it by putting in the putting in messaging that is important to them. And unfortunately, they happen to be the people who are assigned to make the slop, so that means they're pretty much not the A-list talent that is required for the prestige stuff. So they're not going to be the best communicators, and thus they're probably going to make their personal messaging that they find so important, and I might even agree with, they're probably going to do a bad job demonstrating it because they don't have the finesse of top talented and top experienced people out there. Um, the finesse that you would find with Martin Scorsese or Catherine Bigelow, the finesse that you would find in a much more major Hollywood production that has to go through many eyes and be tested time and time again to make sure that it is worth the money put into it. And so you're kind of like, it almost reminds me, we were almost back in like the Ed Wood era, the B movie era, where it's just throw something together. And, it's like, if you want to make it your own little personal message, as long as it's 90 minutes long, we'll make it. And you just have 2 weeks to shoot it. Bye. So that's like that's a long way of saying that I think that but ironically, these are AAA games. They should be the most expensive and tested games. I think with games, it's almost the opposite problem where they get too much time, maybe too much time to think about it. I don't know. There's yet again, this is possibly, I'm out of my depth, and there's things that I know people are accuse the AAA industry of that I don't know for sure, but there's a lot of talk about people with agendas, pushing those agendas, and I don't have enough experience or know-how behind the scenes to say one way or the other, but I would be okay with people pushing agendas if they were doing it in a talented way. FD Signifier, if you know his channel, just released a video about Edgelord and Edgelord Media, and he had two great points. I almost want to do a separate react or take. I think I might do a Jolie's takes, which check out that channel as well. But to give you a little sample of what I'm going to say there is he had two major things to say, which it's like, if so one of the how do you say it? I really should pull the clip when I actually do my take on it. But he essentially said, if we're going to he would rather have good media, like quality media with bad messaging, than good messaging with bad media. So essentially, he'd rather have a Fight Club than a Damsel, I think would maybe be a short way of saying that. If we're going to, it's like, especially because I think he made the argument that ultimately these things don't really move the needle that much. And then he also said, and this was a great line, being smugly correct is killing us. you know, he was referring to like liberal minded or leftist minded people kind of like, you know, just, you know, chattering amongst themselves about like how good the politics or how bad the politics of something is. And it's like, ultimately you're losing the populace, and you're turning them away. Like you're turning your nose up to them, but they're just turning their backs to you essentially. And I think it's causing bigger, worse, like, who cares who cares about like if they got the representation completely correct in the Power Rangers reboot, if you know you if the freaking fascist won the White House, you know, it's like, was it really worth, you know, by this calculation, was it really worth um the, you know, like correcting the sins of Joker 1 by making a worse Joker 2, if it means like, you know, people got alienated and decided to, you know, if they stopped listening to you, and then all of a sudden their ear holes became more open to, you know, the likes of Donald Trump and other people like that. You know, it's you got, there's a reason they say you have to choose your battles.
Let me think about it like this. If making an ugly character, as we've already established, actually is at best like a negative or a net zero effect, and in almost all cases a negative effect, why would anybody do that? And I think that the mindset of putting things into a game that players actively don't like, that is more important than the actual enjoyment of the customer, I think that that mindset is going to permeate the entire game. I don't think that it's just going to begin and end at character selector or at character creation. I think it's going to be the entire game is going to have problems, because it is fundamentally at face value, literally at face value, not designed for an audience. And I feel like
Yeah, you always have to keep your audience in mind. You always, like, you write to your audience. If you're writing for yourself, or if you're writing to preach to your audience instead of entertain your audience, like if you're writing to entertain, you can slip some messaging in there and people will, you know, it'll actually resonate with them. But if you're writing to teach and preach primarily, people are going to completely like roll their eyes and turn away. And the only people you're going to capture are you're going to capture the choir. That's why they call it preaching to the choir.
write a lot. I do. I really feel like, because so I see people getting mad about this, especially getting mad at me. I'm just saying, boys, let's wait and see. Let's see what happens. I wonder if the thing that's happened every single time is going to happen again. Oh wow, what a, what a. I don't even know
Kill the
what
messenger.
to say. It's amazing. Yeah, well, I don't know. The suspense is killing me. I wonder if the game that everybody seems to hate is going to come out and be hated. And so people have been increasingly walling themselves off inside of their own echo chambers and trying to create their own reality. And I think this is the reason why people want censorship on social media a lot. The reason why is because these realities that they create are very, very fragile. And so the moment that one of these realities actually, butts up against an actual, the real world, a real experience, well, then these people are going to be writing posts and talking and complaining about it and saying, oh, we'll do better next time.
Yeah. So basically, I think that this is an example of you can't derive an you can't derive an ought from an is. I think is how it's said. And essentially, you can theorize about how the world can be such a better place, and how this this or that policy or this or that change to the way that we make games, the way that we make movies, the way that we I don't know, feed, do farming can change the world for the better. But ultimately, all these ideas have to stand up to the scrutiny of reality. I'm sorry, I'm not. I feel like I don't quite have the full thought there. That's definitely still brewing. But I mean, he's saying it right here, right now. It's like, people almost can't handle the true reality. They be, facing the actual stakes that they are going up against. I'm still like trying, stick with me here, folks. I'm going to push through and be able to say what's really on my mind as I do this more and more, because I feel like this is a idea that's sitting on the tip of my tongue, but I almost haven't had the audacity to dive off. Like the words haven't taken the dive off of my tongue quite yet.
Reality is that a lot of people don't think that way. And I think that you've had the internet that's allowed so many people to effectively remove themselves from reality and construct their own in place of it. And I think that video game discourse is a very good microcosm of that. But you're seeing this with politics. You're seeing this with, like geopolitics. You're seeing it with social issues. You're seeing it with everything. And people have become increasingly more disconnected from reality because the internet has allowed them to do that. And it actually does a really good job at that. And so what I think is going to keep happening is that these people will continue butting up against reality and becoming very, very frustrated and upset. And I think it's very funny because I also believe they will never learn. But anyway, guys, those are my thoughts. I think Witcher 4, we're going to have to wait and see. I think with Intergalactic, the game, as I said, the graphics for the game look incredible. But I don't really think the game's going to do very well. You make a space bounty hunter video game, and you have like a bald girl who isn't conventionally attractive. I don't think you're really going to get that male audience that those games are really intended for. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that character looked like a side character. And I don't think it's because of her race or her gender expression. I just think she didn't look like like he said, conventionally attractive. And I honestly bet that Naughty Dog is going to release another trailer relatively soon that updates the character model. They are going to address this, maybe not directly, but they'll just be like, oh yeah, we tweaked the character. They have too much on the line, and there's been too many games that, like he said, have like on statistically, like on paper in the spreadsheet have lost money, and you could or didn't sell as much as they were planned to, and that there's a line that you could be drawn straight to not having appealing characters. And this kind of feedback, I bet you this is going to be a Sonic. Honestly, this is going to be a Sonic movie. I'm calling it. This Intergalactic game is going to get Sonicked. The fans are going to have spoken. The producers of the game, the production of the game is going to listen, and they are going to change out the character. I think that's still going to have a lot of the signifiers, but it's going to be an attractive version of the character, or more attractive, probably with some hair but still short, and probably with a little bit softer features, smoother skin, things like that. Maybe more vibrant eyes. I really should watch that trailer again. I just remembering the character. Like I said, it just like if you were going for rough side character in any other game, or like Alien Romulus, and like let's face it, that character I'm referring to in Alien Romulus, spoilers, first one to die. Just saying, like that's kind of like what that character look is almost designed for.
I think you're going to get them. And so we're going to have to wait and see, but that's my prediction. And I think also, you can get mad at the people that are saying and being rude about it or whatever, but my best advice is to just wait and see. And I feel like, again, the thing that's happened every single time will probably happen again. So anyway, guys, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are in the comments, and I figured I'd make this video since I've got the day off and I want to talk about this, and that's pretty much how I feel about it. So anyway, guys, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.
Wow. Good video, Asmon, and King for being able to make that in one take. I mean, even I might have to edit out a few things from this video if I actually have the time to. So I guess I don't necessarily have final thoughts. I think I expressed everything pretty well. I will say that I think it's a mistake for these. If you're on this beat of like, I want attractive characters in a video game, I think, choose your battles. I think you should be going after Intergalactic and, not really shaking the cage on Witcher 4 if this is like your keyboard warrior war that you're going through. Keyboard world war is attractive female game players. Now I did see a stream from Hassan where he was being very dismissive of the criticisms that the that Osmondgold's audience was making, and I think he was doing a decent job of separating out and making sure he was saying Asmondgold's audience or Asmondgold's commenters or his community. But I do think, like, in a way, like, because I do think Asmund's community is way more radical and vocal and even more like he's the troll that gets in front of the camera. He's the charismatic, I will show my face, troll monster, if you will, bridge troll. The people who write his comments and on his subreddit are the ones who would not show their face. So that kind of gives you an idea of where they are and how maybe maybe how undesirable and how unlikable they are. In fact, that actually reminds me, and tell me in the comments if you want to see me do this. I'm actually thinking about going to the Asmongold subreddit and doing a react to the subreddit and seeing what I can find there, because I've heard tale that it's a pretty toxic place. So I'm sure there's going to be interesting things. Let's just take a quick look, see if there's any gold in the comments. It's like his audio quality gets worse in every video. Asmon, we know how much money you make. I am broke as hell, and I got myself this microphone, and this Zoom recorder right here, so you can afford it too, sir. You shouldn't care about these people, the people who cared enough to change these things. People like attractive people. That's why they're called attractive. Yeah, it's like people. Everybody loves money. That's why it's called money. It kind of reminds me of that. All I'm saying is that I would have never played Nier Automaton if 2B was a bald lesbian android. I mean, let's face it. Like, yeah, it's some of the greatest games get you on the hook, with appealing characters. A game, and you can't call the characters. I don't think you can call them sexy. Appealing character design in Hollow Knight. When I first saw it, being played in front of me, and I saw how beautiful the animation was and how clean and appealing the characters were, I fell in love with it. And they are, in fact, I would say that is an example of what attractive is. They are just pleasant to look at. Almost all the characters in that game, aside from maybe some monster characters, are pleasant to look at and make charming sound effects, especially anybody that you can actually interact with and do missions for. You're not just supposed to kill right out of the gate. Why is it modern feminism hating on men while simultaneously trying to be men? I almost don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I will say that the man hate, though, is going a little far. Even as somebody who has a lot of criticisms about men, well, let's say this: the man hate is casting a very wide shot. It should probably be much more of precision shooting instead of just spray and pray, because you're hitting a lot of guys with those comments that are saying all men are blank, and you're hitting a lot of innocent bystanders are catching strays. For people who constantly talk about how everyone's sexual attraction should be respected, these blue sky feminists sure do get pissed off a lot when people are sexually attracted to hot women. Yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of sums it up right there. Men, people, because I'm sure it's true for women, it's true for non-binaries. Almost all of them, if I don't even want to say gun to head, just if they're just being honest with you, they're going to say that they're mostly attracted to people who are conventionally attractive, at least in the broadest sense. Now, each one is going to like this. Yeah, here's it. There's that saying: a good family is good in the same way. Every good family is good in the same way. Every bad family is bad in their own unique way, which I take in this situation to mean attractive people are attractive, and it's broad. And unless you have like some repulsion, like some inner hatred for just good and good things that attractive people, and you just like you hate that with your own personal passion, they're going to be broadly appealing. Each individual less conventionally attractive person might be attractive to a very specific person because they have a very specific look. This is where you have the hear me out situation. Hear me out. this is something I would be into, even though most people wouldn't. So I think that's where it's mostly going to end. It's like, if you're making a game that's supposed to, sell millions of copies, you're going to catch much more. You're going to catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for watching another Jolie Reacts. If there's anybody you want me to react to, please leave them in the comments below. I'm still figuring this out. I do want to do some website reacts, some like product, I guess, reacts or service reacts through websites. So be on the lookout for those. Feel free to share this video with somebody. If maybe you want to share an Asmondgold video with somebody who's like very, allergic to Asmondgold, this might be a good way of sort of, soothing or guiding them in. Maybe I can help soothe them into it. Anyways, thank you so much. Please stop by Jolie's again and make sure to pick out. Wait. What should my sign off be? I'll figure this out. But thank you so much for stopping by Jolie's again, and make sure to get your parking validated on the way out.